The Sunset Strip Diaries, Chapter 11, Big Bang Glamour Cat Scratch Punk Alley Babies. With the exception of that indiscretion in a random bathroom, I appeared to be playing the game correctly. I was one of the popular girls, one of the cool people. I had the look, I knew everyone, and I was finally confident. I had achieved my goal, no matter how lame it was. Partying with the right people for a summer increased my social value even more. It no longer mattered to me that my family was broken apart and my mother couldn't stand me. By the way, you guys, she still can't stand me 30 years later. I had a new family who worshipped me. I was on top. I got a ride to the Strip every weekend, jumped out of the car, and ran off in the crowds to find my friends. I had a toothbrush in my boot and nothing else. I was nuts. Journal entry, June 6, 1991. I only had $4 to last me the whole week, and I pitched in 2 of it for a 12-pack. Michael and I were walking down the Strip drinking those beers when a fight broke out between Johnny Valentine from the Brats and some short-haired guys. Johnny was socked in the back of the head, and then it got broken up. Some girls looked at me and said I looked like I was 12 years old and should be at home watching the Gummy Bears. I was hurt for a second, but I quickly got over it when dark-haired, blue-eyed Sonny from none other than Swingin' Thing asked me to go to a party with them. I was thrilled. They were trying to pull me into their car, and it was starting to drive away when he yelled, "Come on! Come on, jump in!" I was flattered, but I knew if I got in that car, I would end up God knows where. I grabbed my camera, the one time I ever brought it, and I pointed it toward them. They were motioning for me and hanging out of the car. I thought, this will be the ego boost of the year if I can get this shot, the glory. But my camera didn't work, and I looked like an idiot taking a picture of them, instead of either going or saying no. After coming down from my temporary high, I realized I had no ride home. I was just standing there in the dust with a camera and $2. I found Michael, and we got in some girl's car to go to a party. The girl made out with Michael, and before the night was through, she gave him money. That little snake has all the luck. After the party, we laid on the ground and looked up at the sky for UFOs. Then we started slapping each other in the forehead. Eventually, I had to call Jimmy to come and get me. He was pissed. Journal entry, June 16th, 1991. The band that Jimmy put together had their first gig at Ricky Rackman's birthday bash at Madame Wong's West. It was a 21 and over club with a line around the block. Christabel and I got in through the side door, and we were on a guest list. One of the men at the door asked for my ID, and I started to say I didn't have it, but another doorman said, "No one asked if you had ID." And I said, "Well, he just asked me." And the man looked at his partner and said, "What does he know?" I had a lot of beer. Raz was there with his good-looking friend Darren Tyler, and they were sticking their strong margaritas in my face. Darren is hot and tall with olive skin and long burgundy-tinted hair pushed over to the side. He's currently dating the wife of someone pretty famous. She used to be a bikini-clad mud wrestler from the Hollywood Tropicana, and now she stays home while the famous husband is on tour. Darren thinks he's the shit and has the personality of a bored debutante. He had the nerve to say, "Not to be mean, but your boyfriend is ugly. Does he have like some really great personality or something?" I wasn't shaken because I had heard it many times before by bigger names than his high school going ass. I responded in a more bored manner than even he could muster. "I can't deal with your attitude, and I won't tolerate it," I said. Then I walked away with my eyebrows up. I didn't want to stand in the long line for the bathroom, so I walked right in front of every single girl in line and went straight into a stall and peed, and they were really mad. I did that twice. All right, out of the journal now. I didn't bat an eyelash at checking out another guy at Jimmy's show because I had just recently done way worse. I had cheated on him with Roxy. I kept trying to tell myself that maybe it wasn't cheating because I didn't so much as touch his private parts, but he had touched mine, and I had made out with him. I couldn't believe myself. Christabel was truly ready to change scenes at that point. She was completely exhausted. She started to take interest in the rave scene and wanted to start going to underground clubs. But I wasn't ready to leave Hollywood. I had only just begun. I had found a place where I felt comfortable and happy, and I wasn't about to give it up to start dancing in abandoned warehouses with a pacifier in my mouth. I didn't blame her for leaving the Hollywood scene, and me along with it. I was totally using her to drive me around, which was horrible. I wasn't even hiding it. The guys dared me to kiss beautiful Missy one night on the way to Hollywood. She turned around from the front seat of the car, and I leaned up toward her, heart beating fast, wanting to be cool in front of my older friends. All the guys woo-hooed after we started kissing, and we all laughed, and I felt initiated and cool. I also felt even further away from my peers in high school and realized I had no one to tell my story to. I couldn't tell Abby. She would think I was gay and be uncomfortable around me. I would have to keep things to myself. I continued my double life of high school student by day and rock chick by night. The next thing I knew, it was time for me to graduate high school. I looked around me as if to say, "What? Really? It's over?" I was actually enjoying my senior year, and I kind of wished I had paid more attention to it. I was presented with 2 awards in journalism at a special luncheon. I was stunned going up to accept the plaques. I was thinking, me? Really? I felt proud to have written for the school paper, in which I had pushed my way into the title of sports editor, though I knew nothing about sports whatsoever, and the literary arts magazine, where they pulled my story on heroin addicts and featured a story of a black bear on a hunting trip instead. I had improved my tennis game, and I somehow scored A's in economics and government, of all things. I had become proficient in the stock market club, investing my fake money in stocks each week. I rolled into class, hungover, and bought and sold stocks like a champ. I was like Gordon Gekko, ready to start corporate raiding up in that bitch. We didn't have the internet back then, so I had to sit there and scan the Wall Street Journal every day, but I chomped on an apple, I made my picks. I was a born risk-taker, so my portfolio beat the pants off the others. I couldn't believe I had made it after how hard it was after 10th grade and how I had missed most of 11th grade for being in the mental hospital. I had somehow thrived in 12th grade. It was a miracle. Jimmy came to my graduation with loads of red roses, and my dad even showed up in a bad suit. We had one last family picture taken, my mother looking thin and frail, and my father looking rather tanked. My sister's eyes were watering in the picture. She was totally uncomfortable, surprised by my father's attendance. I had a regular smile on my face and looked completely normal. I could bluff better than anyone I knew. It was no different that day. I looked out at the sunset over the mountains and the valley, and I thought to myself, I will never come to this school again. I will never see these kids again. It's over. I felt melancholy. I spent that summer learning to drive. It was about time. I had finally saved up enough money to buy a car, a pale blue Honda Accord. My mother took me for driving lessons after she got off work each day. She was scared teaching me because I was always blasting music, speeding, and making left turns on the tail of other cars without looking to see if it were safe to go, all during rush hour traffic. We didn't have those little arrows back then. You just tried to make it. It was hectic, but she stuck with it because I would need no further rides from her once I learned to drive. I'd take myself to work, take myself to community college in the fall. Once I learned to drive, I was never home. I went to Hollywood every second I got, driving back home, shit-faced drunk, thinking nothing of it. Missy left the scene at that time, and her girlfriends disappeared with her. She ran off with some guy and got hooked on some of the bad shit. I ran into her one time, and she was almost skeletal, with dyed brown hair and black clothes. She was not all bouncy and happy. She was even a little mean. The dazzle was gone. The smiles were gone. She was robbed of her sparkle. Raz wasn't around as much either because some guy had pulled a gun on the teller who was helping him at the bank, and it scared the hell out of him. He was so shaken up that he didn't go out for a while. That left me with Michael, and he was curating a new crowd of his own. While most of the bands on Sunset tried to be attractive, a few took the shock value route, playing up the fact that they were not pretty. One of those bands was called the Glamour Punks. They had been around for a few years, but were always breaking up and replacing members. So they were on hiatus at certain points. That summer, they had a new lineup and were back in full force, socializing and getting themselves out there. I was interested to see what they were all about. Journal entry, July 21st, 1991. As the strip started to fill with people this past weekend, I saw the crowds part. The sickly, infamous, overly made-up glamour punks were trotting up the trashed sidewalk. Michael and I butted into their group, and the next thing I knew, I was shaking hands with Strange, Schizo, Spaz, and Dizzy Damage. It's kind of hilarious that these guys were all polite and shaking hands. The singer, Screaming Boy Mandy, ruined all of that by screaming in my ear as loud as he could. I guess hence the name. He was smiling these wide, snarling grins to his surrounding onlookers. His hair is fire engine red with shaved sides, and his eyes are thickly lined, coming to points on the inner and outer corners. He could very well be Satan, or the closest thing to it. Whatever image he's trying to project for his band, it's working. People are interested in him. The guy has showmanship. He's got something different going on. Strange was very sweet and didn't seem as hardcore as the others, but he had the look and he fit in with them physically. Skinny, long black hair, pale skin, wearing black leather bondage-type pants, and a ripped punk t-shirt. Dizzy had his chin and his tongue pierced and was relatively quiet, with sad eyes. He sort of looked like a punk Johnny Depp. I can't remember how the other ones behaved. They were pretty interesting, though, something a little different from what I've been seeing. Their logo is hated by millions, loved by all. And they have a really big buzz right now in the magazines. The glamour punks caused a general fear amongst the super glammy bubblegum bands. To be on their bad side was not recommended because they could beat the shit out of most of the people there. Michael befriended them in a smart social move. He was no fool. It was at that point that our crowd turned from glam rock to a little more edge. We were in with the glamour punks. While other styles of bands still hung in our set, the glamour punks would remain the driving force of the crowd and sit perched at the top of the party scene because there was no one to take them down. There were not only new guys on the scene, there were new girls too. I first saw a girl named Bertie Montgomery in August 1991, a few months after I graduated. I was about to turn 18 and she had just turned 15. The reason I knew that was because she was out one night running around in a tight red gingham dress, announcing to the world that it was her 15th birthday. She looked like a young Jessica Alba. She had olive skin and shiny caramel-colored hair that was all one length and curled at the ends. She had perfectly shaped brows over huge dark Bambi eyes and thick black eyelashes. She had a gorgeous white smile and a beauty spot above the corner of her left lip. I thought, oh wow, she's beautiful, but she's really ditzy and young. I saw her another night later that year when I was hanging out with Bobby Berry. He got one look at her face. He said she looked like a live Cosmo cover. He dropped my hand and went straight to her, never returning. Word on the street was that she had been dating one of the guys in Guns N' Roses at 14. Limos sent to her house and everything. I saw another blossoming rival outside of the Roxy. I smiled at her pretty moon face and noted her very long, straight, gold hair and pink cheeks. She came over to me and asked me if I knew Bertie. Then I remembered some girl telling me about a 13-year-old named Ashley stealing her boyfriend. I immediately knew it had to be her. I stayed clear of her. I couldn't believe that I was one of the older girls on the strip. I was only 18. It had happened overnight. I went from being too young to borderline too old. It was shocking. And with Missy and Christabel gone, I was running out of girls to hang out with. So I took a chance and hoped that Trisha might be as desperate as I was. I called her one day and apologized to her for beating her up. What can I say? I was a nice person. No, not really. I needed a sidekick. And get this, she was so bored that she was more than happy to hang out with me again, despite the ass-kicking she received. We were not exactly students of civility. By the way, guys, I'm actually friends with this person today, and we are great friends, and we laugh about our old times. And her name's not really Trisha, by the way. Back to the story. The band Jimmy formed with Pierre started to garner interest. They recruited a French friend of Pierre's as the drummer. Trisha thought he was the hottest thing she had ever seen. His name was Andre, and a few other guys completed the lineup. Jimmy and his band felt they were this close to getting a record deal. I secretly did not want them to make it. I was such a hater. I sat around thinking, who would buy his records? I felt that the only two Hollywood bands that weren't a fad were Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses. Oh, and Van Halen. Oh, well, and Rat. Okay, fine, and Poison. Jimmy flew to New York with his band to accompany L.A. Guns at some show, and they met with Polygram Records. He said he was riding around Manhattan in limos, put up in expensive hotels, and while he was doing all that, I started hanging around a friend of Bobby Berry's, and a roommate of Bobby Berry's, by the way, named Harmony. He was tall, with teased platinum blonde hair, a great square jaw, rounded white teeth, and light baby blue eyes. He was a truly beautiful human being, and he had no attitude whatsoever. He was almost like a golden retriever puppy or something, the coolest guy ever. Harmony talked about art galleries, beauty products, Thai food, and Catalina Island at midnight. He liked ragtime and the ballet, Madonna, and lobster at Gladstone's and Malibu. He worked in a sex shop selling penis stretchers and dildos. He used to wear false eyelashes, garter belts, and teddies in his old band. He idolized Morgan Fairchild. He thought she was a goddess. He wanted his jaw to look just like hers. I was like, dude, it already does. Morgan Fairchild wishes she could look like you. In hindsight, I can see that he may have been gay and not out of the closet. His wearing garter belts and teddies did not faze me, even though he was taking it to another level than the rest of the guys I knew. Most of the guys, most of the guys were completely normal. Well, somewhat, once they were away from the strip and had their costumes off. They acted like typical straight men. My gaydar was completely screwed up from dating these glam guys. How was I to know who was into what? It's really hard to tell. Garter belts? Sure, why not? His fondness of the ballet and other culture should have tipped me off, yes. But I was in an eccentric, batty scene that was so much like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party on acid that I didn't see what was right in front of me. And still, Harmony was one of the nicest, sweetest, and most interesting people I met out there. In November of 1991, I went to a new underground club called The Church, which was off Cahuenga, or something like that, toward the valley. A bunch of girls who worked for Heidi Fleiss were there, and so were all the Hollywood usuals. It was a real church, if I'm not mistaken. Inside it was all glowing with neon grave sites under black lighting, a bunch of tombstones. It was really cool. It was a mix of the Cat House crowd and the Sunset crowd. And that ended up screwing me because someone in Jimmy's crowd saw me walk in there with Harmony, and Jimmy dumped me the next day. Oh, and I forgot to mention that I single-handedly brought down that club. It was a secret underground club, which I guess means operating without license and permits. One night I was speeding around trying to find the damn place, and I couldn't locate it, hence it being an underground club. I had the New York Dolls turned up so loud I did not hear the cops behind me with a bullhorn, telling me to slow down and pull over. They thought I was running from them. I finally looked in the rearview mirror and saw flashing lights. I pulled over and played very, very dumb and bimbo-y to the male cops. When I got out of the car, I said I couldn't find where I was going. I needed help. I mindlessly gave them the address, and they tried to help me find it. Needless to say, the place was busted that night and was shut down soon thereafter. Guess I wasn't playing dumb. I was dumb. Around that time, Michael decided to get legitimate and join a band as a singer. After all, what the hell were these people doing on the strip if they weren't promoting a music career? Well, partying, of course, but there had to be a front. And Michael was not about to learn how to play an instrument. That would be too time-consuming and take away from his social life. So he joined a little-known band who had just come to town called Alley Cat Scratch. All of them had long black hair, white skin, wore lots of makeup. They wore mostly lip service stuff in black and purple. I don't remember if they were talented or if they sucked because I was usually pretty wasted at their shows. I just know they went from 0 to 60 in a week, Because of Michael's popularity, they really lucked out. Michael was one of the most popular guys on the strip. He knew everyone. Alley Cat Scratch had a full house at every show and built-in friends to party with every single weekend. Let's see, Alley Cat Scratch. All right, Devin Lovelace was the guitarist. He seemed pissed off whenever I saw him. He rarely spoke around me and he never smiled, but that could be because he found me annoying. He had shoulder-length hair that appeared to be relaxed or straightened in some way. Boa, formerly Bobby, was the bassist. He was a little intimidating because he was quick and witty. He was clearly intelligent. He had long, stringy black hair and huge features. He wore a Charlie Chaplin hat and was pretty social. People really liked him a lot. He appeared to be the brains behind the operation. Robbie Black was their drummer. Girls went ballistic for him. He was very cute with puffy lips, pretty cat eyes, and kind of feminine features. He had very long dyed black hair, almost to his ass. He got along very well with everyone and was generally a nice guy, very cordial. With Alley Cat Scratch as a front for many, many more parties and much more craziness, we were wasted non-stop. The 3 other guys in the band were more serious about making music, but Michael didn't really care. He just wanted to party. He moved in with them in a building on the corner of Yucca and Whitley in a very bad area of Hollywood. I'd forgotten his apartment number at first and stupidly asked the security guard, "Have you seen a skinny guy with long black hair?" He said, "You just described half this building." Jimmy and I still really loved each other, but neither of us would leave our social lives. They were like families we had created for ourselves, and they were more powerful than what we were to each other, I guess. We both got something from our scenes that fulfilled us. Mostly ego boosts and confidence, I think. I don't even know why I wanted to have a boyfriend. It really was absurd. I never even saw him that year. If he would have just let me hang out with him as I originally wanted to, I probably never would have ventured off on my own. That really came back and bit him in the ass. I turned 18 that September. It wasn't some joyous occasion for me, I barely noticed. I was already living as an adult. An irresponsible, crazy adult maybe, but an adult nonetheless. I came and went as I pleased. I was never home. I didn't have an established family structure because my mother was working 2 jobs, and my sister spent as much time as possible away from the house. I hadn't seen my father around, which was good, and I was still working at the beauty supply store, and I started to attend the local community college that fall. I was signed up for film and media classes, which were interests of mine before I turned to the dark side and depended solely on my looks for an identity. It cracked open the hard pod that was my soul, just a tiny crack. I was so interested in the film class that my heart hurt. It was a class that focused on film noir, mainly Hitchcock. Watching Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart in Rear Window made me forget about my life. I thought the films were so beautifully put together, so gloriously scored, and so perfectly costumed. It was just painfully wonderful. I really longed to do storyboards and direct a beautiful movie. The media class, Social Values and Mass Communication, was so interesting to me that I read the book in my free time, highlighting passages that I liked. My journalism class also compelled me. I felt a stirring in my gut, swishing around with all of the alcohol. It made me feel like more of a person just to be learning something. My mind craved it. But there was a crazy party going on and not everyone was invited. I foolishly told myself that books would be there when this party was over. There were some hot new faces in town that fall. There were lots of glittered pale pink, white, and lavender, and they had the perfect shade of expensively highlighted hair, which was the color of baby chicks. Despite all of that, they still had beer bottles in their hands and cigarettes hanging out of their mouth, and they were always with beautiful, bitchy blonde girls. My crowd took them in on the spot. They got the part without having to audition. Their names were Kit Ashley, Freddie Farron, Tweety Boyd, and Carrie Kelly. They called themselves Big Bang Babies. These guys appeared to have a little bit more money backing them than the others. I realized not too much later that Kit Ashley somehow had 2 different Jaguars and lived in a penthouse apartment on the corner of Franklin and La Brea. He had a white jag and a black jag. I don't know whose they were, but I remember he had two different jags. I believe he also had a job writing for a magazine of some sort, but that couldn't have paid shit. Kit was a Bret Michaels / David Lee Roth knockoff with a face like one of the Olsen twins. Very, very cute. Carrie was a very serious musician and did not go out partying with the other three as much. He was super beautiful, looked like a model. He had one side of his hair dyed black and the other side was bleached white, and he had it up in puppy dog ear ponytails a lot of the time. He thought I was ridiculous and he completely ignored me. All of the guys in my crowd became best buddies with Big Bang babies, especially Freddie and Tweety. It was the smart thing to do. They would have lost if they would have tried to compete with them. I latched on to Freddie first. He was the most approachable. He seemed surprised that I was interested in befriending him, and he latched right back onto me. Freddie had the same bleached hair, really deep blue eyes, and a great smile. He really amused me for some reason. He was kind of a sad sap, really self-deprecating, and he kind of lacked the confidence compared to the other three. I really hung out with him quite a bit. Tweety was living with an heiress called Tipsy LaFabula in a house in Laurel Canyon. She supported him, naturally. She wore feather boas, huge Audrey Hepburn hats, and elbow-length gloves. He was the one who walked up to me before he knew me and asked if I wanted a boyfriend, and then walked away once he heard how little money I made. I love that. Tweety had huge eyes that were made up like the 60s model Twiggy, with tons of eyeliner way outside the rim of the eye to create an even bigger eye. He sometimes wore a bandana tied around his head with a knot on the top, like Aunt Jemima or Tupac. He always had a cigarette in his hand. He never had any expression on his face whatsoever. He was just very calm and restrained. He was never crazy, never yelling, never fighting. He was very composed. He really couldn't be bothered. One time I took Tweety to the Strip, and I opened my trunk so he could throw his stacks of flyers inside. He saw my school books, and he looked up at me with a puzzled face. I stood there staring back at him, shivering in my little gold dress, wondering what the problem was. He said, "You're like smart? You're in school?" He took a long drag of his cigarette and blew smoke from his lungs. "How old are you?" I felt nervous for some reason. Was this going to ruin my image? Was this not a good thing? I was convinced I should have hidden my books and thrown a couple of gallons of Jim Beam in the back with a dead body. I told him how old I was, and he said, 18? What are you doing hanging around guys like us? I scrunched up my eyes and I said, "Well, how old do you have to be?" Then I slammed the trunk. I went to a party with all of the popular guys one night. At one point, I was holding court. They were all around me in a circle, sipping drinks and talking. Tweety, Robbie, Freddie, and a few others were there. I was flirting and being coquettish and feeling all great. And without realizing it, I backed into a candelabra. I saw a few of their eyes widen and I smelled something burning. My hair was starting to go up in flames. Everyone at the party stopped what they were doing and watched me scream, shriek, and try to stamp out the flames on my head. Michael helped me to slap myself in the head, and he enjoyed it far too much. Luckily, the fire was eating up my hairspray before really getting down to business with my actual hair, so the damage was nothing a little teasing couldn't cover. In the coming winter months, my crowd hit party after party and went to lots of shows. We all seemed to be paying attention only to each other. There was a band we saw all of the time called the Shrinky Dinks. They got a record deal and changed their name to Sugar Ray because Milton Bradley was going to sue them for using the name of one of their toys. We were like, "Sugar who?" Then there were our buddies that were in a band called Slam Hound. We must have partied at their place on Orange 5,000 times. They became a band called Buck Cherry and went on to fame and fortune, while we all were chugging beers in the dirt somewhere. I still hung out with Harmony on some nights. We laid under his covers, giggled, and talked about skiing and Palm Springs and other girly shit. We really should have done our toes and watched Molly Ringwald movies. Harmony would have made a great best friend, but I could not get past how attractive he was. I kept hoping for more, but he clearly was not interested in me in that way. I was also still hanging around Trisha. who did not mind that I had pounded her face in only 6 months prior. We took my sister and her Middleton friend Lainey to El Compadre one night. Strange from the Glamour punks and Michael went with us, and it was raining. Michael and Tricia started making fun of each other and bantering. It started when he looked at her with all seriousness and said, "Nice stash." She put her hand to her upper lip and her eyes got big. She called him an asshole, and it went on from there. I wrote, Michael threw a handful of lettuce at Tricia, then all of the sugar packets, then some of the beer cans we smuggled in. Then he threw the salt and pepper shakers, the tortilla chips, and even a butter knife at her forehead. She moved and it hit the picture on the wall. Stacy Stars came in with his bandmate Dazzle and ordered a bunch of food and drinks for us. I thought he was so generous, and I even started liking him after 12 drinks. The next thing I knew, he jumped up from the table and ran. Dazzle followed. I was like, wait, what the? Before I could get the red straw out of my mouth, I realized, oh shit, they just ditched us with the bill. And you know me, I don't even carry any money. So anyway, they jumped into a van, reversed at top speed, and slammed into the car parked behind them. Then they slammed forward into whatever was in front of them. Stacy kept reversing, accelerating, slamming both ends, smashing his van as hard as he could. He finally compacted the car behind him enough to get out of the space. Then he swerved out, reversed into a wall, smashed another car. We were screaming, "Stacy, stop!" He was making the biggest, loudest scene, and everyone from the restaurant was yelling, "Get the police!" El Compadre tried holding us for the bill, but we jumped in my car and left because both Michael and Strange have warrants. It rained a lot that winter. I drove completely drunk in the rain to hang out with Harmony and Bobby Berry a few times a week at their apartment. They seemed to really appreciate my style, but neither appeared to be attracted to me otherwise. I was convinced I needed just to be a little bit more cool, but I was always doing some kind of clumsy or dorky things when I was around them. I dropped Harmony off in the street one night, and as I was pulling away, he yelled something. "Oh, maybe he wants to kiss me, finally!" I was so thrilled. This is it! I carefully reversed, drove my car backwards to him, and pressed the brake, fluttering my eyelashes, trying to give him sexy eyes. I talked to him for about 5 minutes, long enough to where I forgot my car was in reverse. There was no kiss. Bummer. We said goodbye to each other, and I was going to step on the gas and peel out to be cool, and thank God he was no longer behind me when I hit the gas. I would have ran that bitch over. I just remember shooting backwards really fast and almost slamming into a tree. Another time I was outside of his apartment in the daytime, looking for a parking space. He lived on Hollywood Boulevard just past La Brea. There was no one in the streets. They were completely dead. It was very, very quiet. All I could hear were birds chirping. And the blocks were only about 20 feet long. There was tiny little blocks. There was no one on the streets. They were completely dead, like I said. Okay, sorry. I was a new driver, so I was a little nervous. A stoplight for one of the teeny side streets was yellow. And instead of just going through it, I hit the brakes so hard that I skidded through the light with the loudest screech you ever heard in your life, and it literally brought people out onto their balconies to see what the commotion was. It was so loud, it was as if I had avoided like a semi or a deer or something really crazy. I left black marks in the street. Journal entry, January 13th, 1992. I'm in a gray sweatshirt and cut-off sweatpants. I haven't showered or gotten off my ass all day. Get me out of this rut. Drinking, staying on couches, throwing up. I'm stuck on these drag queen guys and I'm secretly hoping something will interest me more. I'm sick of this lifestyle. Even though Trisha and I are going for test shoots for bikini modeling on Sunday, I'm going to end up backing out of it, but she needs the money. Trisha went to the shoot without me, and the guy tried sleeping with her when she got there. I had been in situations that were similar. Once I called an ad for figure modeling at a place called World Models. I didn't know that they started girls like Tracy Lords and a slew of other women in porn. They acted as if it was bikini modeling, and I thought, oh, that's perfect. They had someone call me for a pre-interview, and he asked me how my private parts were shaved. Whoa, Nelly. I flaked on my appointment. Another time I met with a photographer that said he shot 4 Zig-Ans bikinis, and he needed a model. I met him in the valley and had a margarita with him, and he showed me his book. It was the Zig-Ans catalog. He said, "Oh, I shoot pictures like these." And I said, "Wait a minute, like these? Did you take these pictures that we're looking at right now?" And the moron said no. He didn't even have any pictures that he took because he had probably never even taken a picture in his life. He was surely too busy raping and killing dumb girls like me and burying their remains in the desert. Another time I answered an ad for lingerie modeling. I was pretty dense. It took me a lot to learn my lesson. I showed up at this office building on Ventura Boulevard in a nice part of Encino. I went up some stairs to an empty office with little dressing rooms in it. It was just some pervy man and me. Here's how his business worked. He had some crappy lingerie line that was a front for prostitution. Clients paid him to see a girl model the lingerie. If the girl wanted to take anything off for tips or take it further, well, then that was her prerogative. The man said he needed to see me dance without anything on before he could think about hiring me. I was like, "Say what?" It was just us two there, and I was afraid he would rape me or something, so I tried to remain cool and just get out of there. I played dumb and said I would come back when I had my bikini to dance in or something awkward like that. I burned rubber out of that joint. In my car on the way home, I thought about the poor girls that actually had to do such things for a living. I didn't know it at the time, but I would be meeting one very soon.